Atheism as a movement is extremely varied. There are innumerable philosophies that have cropped up in the past few hundred years that aren't contingent on or are outright antithetical to the belief in a god. This is obviously due to the fact that atheism is built around a negative claim. It's a rejection of the foundational principles behind most religious discourse, and is therefore not a solid foundation for any system of thought in and of itself. Differing brands of atheism emerge from the necessity to turn to a solid positive claim to serve as the foundation for whatever logical structures one erects for the purpose of interpreting the world. The difficulty in pinning down exactly what atheism is lies in these differing and often mutually exclusive positive claims that atheists must necessarily adopt in order to justify any positions on any claims at all. That being said, I want to deal honestly with some of the more common fallback arguments that I see being deployed by atheists in the hopes of refining the discourse that has emerged around the God question. Many of the common arguments can be shown to be insufficient by invoking the distinction between subjective and objective. The concept of God, as far as I can tell, is only meaningful when talked about in relation to the subject. Believers often talk about things like their personal relationship with God or their direct experience of God. This essential component of faith is often scoffed at by atheists because it offers no evidence of the objective existence of such a being. But I would submit that although factual, this point is essentially irrelevant. The reason that this is irrelevant is that the concept of God essentially serves as an organizational component in the framework through which people subjectively view the world. In this sense, God is a strictly formal concept, as the content of this concept varies from person to person. As an example, it may be said that a rich man's conception of God differs vastly from a poor man's conception of God, but they both essentially serve the same functions of explanation and consolation. This analysis of the subjectivity of the concept of God has plenty of room for elaboration, but in this abridged form it serves to shed light on the difficulties that some of the stock atheist arguments encounter. Perhaps the most common form that any argument against the existence of God takes is in the appeal to scientific epistemology. The difficulty inherent in this line of argument is that science is a discourse that is organized around a methodology designed for the investigation of objective phenomena. To point out that the evidence for the objective existence of God is virtually non-existent is a necessary but ultimately insufficient condition for the dismantling of the religious worldview. You can talk about burden of proof until you're blue in the face, but ultimately the religious person and the atheist will end up talking past one another, because the religious experience God every day, subjectively, by organizing their experience of the world around the concept of God. This fact leads us to the actual truth content of the God concept. Within the religious mindset, there is a need for assuming the existence of God. God is an answer to their suffering. A wrong answer, but an answer nonetheless. Believers are happy to point out ad nauseum that without God, life is meaningless. The truth content of the God concept lies in the desire to turn away from what they feel is a meaningless world. Some atheists cruelly refer to God as a crutch, but if we really want to be serious about combating the God concept, we simply must examine the reasons why people are dissatisfied with the world as it is. Karl Marx wrote beautifully about this fact in the following often quoted passage from his critique of Hegel's philosophy of right. Religious suffering is, at one and the same time, the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is the demand for their real happiness. To call on them to give up their illusions about their condition is to call on them to give up a condition that requires illusions. The criticism of religion is, therefore, in embryo, the criticism of that veil of tears of which religion is the halo. Criticism has plucked the imaginary flowers on the chain, not in order that man shall continue to bear that chain without fantasy or consolation, but so that he shall throw off the chain and pluck the living flower. The criticism of religion disillusions man, so that he will think, act, and fashion his reality like a man who has discarded his illusion and regained his senses, so that he will move around himself as his own true sun. Religion is only the illusory sun which revolves around man as long as he does not revolve around himself.